Go.
So what subjects do you teach?
Well, I teach English and I teach history.
Excellent. How many years have you been teaching English and history?
I've been teaching now for 9.5 years. Yep. Both English and history throughout that whole time.
And what year groups do you teach or have you taught in the past in these 9 years?
Yep, I've taught this all the way from 7 to 12, predominantly year 8, 11 and 12, with a mixture of 7, 9 and 10. Yeah.
And what years do you teach this year?
This year I have year 8, year 10, year 11 and year 12.
Do you teach co-ed or single-sex classes?
Currently all co-ed classes.
Have you had any experience teaching single-sex classes?
Yeah, I've taught at 2 single-sex schools, and at the current school I'm at, which I've been at for quite a while, we've on occasion had all-boy classes, which I've had the pleasure of teaching.
Were those single-sex schools boys or girls schools?
Oh, boys schools.
Cool.
Yeah.
How do you think boys learn English differently according to whether they're in a single-sex, like all-boys class, or if they're in a co-ed class? Are there any differences in their attitudes?
I don't think that there are huge differences between a co-ed class and a single-sex class. Sometimes you'll have in a single-sex class the boys their attitude together is not at all tempered by the girls, who perhaps might tell them to get over it. But it depends more on the ability level. So if you've got an all-boy class of boys who are highly motivated, which I had at North Sydney Boys, then it makes no difference whether there's girls in the class or not. They appear to be motivated, they appear to be keen, they want to learn, and I imagine that would be the case whether there are girls there or not. If you've got a low ability class, which I've had on occasion at a couple of schools, then I think again, whether there's girls in the class or not, the boys are not going to be overly motivated to learn English, unfortunately. So whether girls are there or not, I don't think is the huge factor in boys' education. It can have some impact, but not a huge impact. It depends more on the boys' motivation.
So with this in mind, do you think that social construction or peer groups play any role in the boys' attitudes to learning English? So you're saying it depends on their ability. Do you think peer groups and social construction have any impact?
Certainly. Again, when I was at North Sydney Boys, the general attitude amongst the boys was to work hard, to push each other, and to try and achieve the best they could. That brought out a certain competition amongst the group, and that pushed them really hard to do as well as they could. On the complete other end of the scale, when you've got a bunch of boys who are not interested and not motivated, or you've got a few who are sort of the dominant ones in that group who take that attitude, a lot of the other boys will follow that similar attitude of what's the point, we're never going to use this, this is not overly useful, I don't care, that sort of thing. So certainly the peer group and the social groups that they come from can play a huge part.
Research and media articles often stereotype that boys don't like reading, girls are better at English than boys, and boys would rather play sport. Have you witnessed any evidence of this in your teaching career?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
The research and media articles often stereotype that boys don't like reading, girls are better at English than boys, and boys would rather be playing sport. Have you witnessed any evidence of this in your teaching career?
Boys would definitely rather be playing sport. Most boys. There's a few who'd rather be reading books, but generally speaking, that sort of thing is true. Are girls better at English? Again, I would say that as a generalisation, that is probably true, although I've seen plenty of boys who are exceptionally good at English. So, while I give some credence to the generalisation that girls enjoy English more and tend to do better at it, I wouldn't say that that's a guarantee. And what was the first part?
And that boys don't like reading.
Oh, okay. Boys not liking reading can be interesting. Some boys don't like reading, but even those boys, given the right book, might actually find themselves loving reading. I often think perhaps part of the problem is book choice. We spent a lot of time, a number of years back, trying to improve girls' education, and I think a lot of the books that we do at school tend to tend to have a preference towards something that the girls would enjoy. Yeah. And they may be things that boys would absolutely hate in comparison. Yeah. So it's unfortunate, but boys and girls enjoy reading different things. And if you have a class that is predominantly focused on teaching books that girls enjoy, no surprise you're going to come up with it's going to look like the girls enjoy reading and the boys hate it. You start giving boys books though that boys enjoy reading a bit more, give it a bit more action, a bit more adventure. You might actually find the boys enjoy reading a little bit more than the stereotype would suggest.
And with that in mind, do you think then that boys are trying to prove their masculinity, those ones who might not be getting the right book choice and would rather be playing sport? Do you think in a way they're trying to prove their masculinity by rejecting English and not saying that it's something they'd like to be doing?
I think there's an element of that, yeah. So the stereotype of boys hating poetry, for example, it just sounds so girly. There's a lot of boys who, for the sake of their reputation, their masculine reputation, may say, I hate poetry, but I'm never going to use this. However, most boys tend to, so in that aspect of rejecting English, I think there are some who would reject English because it is perceived as slightly more feminine. Some, I wouldn't say all or even the majority, but I would say some would do that, particularly with things like poetry. However, boys tend to, if it's about trying to show their masculinity, this often tends to happen more in the sporting field and that sort of thing rather than in the classroom, which again can be a demotivator for trying to work hard.
Mm. Yeah. So how do you adapt your teaching style to make English interesting for boys and girls?
That's a very difficult question. It's a very difficult thing to do. For boys, you need to give them a purpose and a reason for doing what they're doing. Girls will often do things because you tell them to. Boys, however, need to see a point and a purpose to what they're doing. So often you may need to spend time actually explaining what is the value in what we are doing. Often the first lesson will involve, jumping ahead a little bit and saying, in this book we may learn about things like, and then explain the sorts of values that may come out and trying then to adapt those values to their lives. Because they've got to try and see some sort of point or usefulness to what they're doing. Some boys will do it for the sake of it, some boys may actually be interested in the content, but again, a lot of them will not want to learn if they can't see a reason or a point in what they're doing. So you've got to work hard at giving it some sort of importance and value. Yeah. So that's the main thing with boys, is trying to get that motivation out of them by showing them that there actually is a reason for doing this. Otherwise, you can try and do creative different things. Trying to work with computers a little bit can often help boys. Yesterday we did a Middle-earth MySpace. Got the characters to, as a character task, they had to make a MySpace page, a fake one, but a MySpace page for the characters from the text, and a lot of the boys got really into that because it involved computers and searching for images and things like that. So again, you've got to try and find the things that boys are more interested in and see if you can incorporate that into your teaching a little bit. It's a hard task. It's a hard task for lots of teachers. Trying to find ways that will motivate both boys and girls. Because a lot of girls may not enjoy the sorts of things that you're doing with boys, and then you've got a new problem. You've got a bunch of girls who don't want to do their work and start to become a little obstinate. But generally speaking, if you can get the boys, you will get the girls as well. It's a bit of a stereotype that tends to show itself to be true. So girls will often do things just because they've been asked to. Boys, however, need to see some purpose.
Great. And for the last question, what do you enjoy about English?
What do I enjoy about English? Wow. I like understanding people. And when people write, they express a little bit about themselves or their understanding of humanity and mankind and the world. And I like deconstructing those ideas that people put forward and seeing where have they come up with those values, why are they there. It helps us to understand people better. We're always going to be dealing with people, so that's why I think English actually is fairly important, because it teaches us about people and the way they think, the way they express themselves. Yeah.
Great, thanks for your time.
Pleasure.